The most liberating thing I've ever done was stop explaining myself to people who weren't asking with the intent to understand, but only to criticize. When I stopped explaining myself, I realized how much unnecessary energy I had been pouring into people who didn't deserve it. I've learned that my peace is too valuable to waste on those who don't understand my journey. I no longer explain myself. I simply live. I no longer explain myself to people who are only interested in making assumptions. My life is my stories to tell, and I'll tell it when I'm ready. I'm done explaining myself to those who only want to hear what suits their narrative. I'm living for me now, and that's all that matters. I've learned that the need to explain yourself often comes from seeking validation. I don't need anyone's validation anymore. I have my own. I don't need to explain why I made certain decisions. My choices are a reflection of my growth, and I don't owe an explanation to anyone who isn't part of my journey. Some people just don't get it, and that's okay. I've stopped explaining myself because I've learned that not everyone deserves an explanation. Explaining myself used to be my way of seeking approval, but now I realize that my life, my choices, and my feelings are mine alone to own and protect. I've stopped explaining my silence. It's not empty, it's full of strength, self-respect, and boundaries. When you stop explaining yourself to others, you begin to understand that your worth is not dependent on their opinion. People will never understand your truth until they are ready to listen. And I'm done waiting for that moment. I no longer explain myself. I simply live my truth. I'm done explaining myself because I've learned that sometimes people will only believe what they want to believe. I'd rather focus on living authentically than convincing anyone of my worth. Explaining myself to others who have already made up their mind about me is a waste of energy. I've learned to protect my energy by not wasting it on misunderstandings. I don't need to explain my choices or my boundaries. I've learned that people will either accept me for who I am or they won't, and that's not something I can control. No one understands your struggles like you do. I'm done explaining my struggles to people who haven't walked a single mile in my shoes. I've come to realize that I don't need to explain myself to those who don't have the capacity to understand. My peace is my priority now. Sometimes, silence says everything that words can't express. I've stopped explaining myself to those who won't hear me anyway. I've stopped trying to explain my worth to people who have never truly seen me. I no longer seek validation from anyone who isn't invested in my growth. No more explanations, no more justifying. My life, my choices, my path are mine to walk, And if you don't understand, that's okay. I don't need to explain why I protect my peace. The moment I started valuing my own peace, I stopped explaining myself to anyone who didn't deserve it. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to find freedom. You no longer have to prove who you are or why you are the way you are to anyone. I've realized that I don't need to explain my worth to anyone. My actions speak louder than words ever could, and those who truly matter will see that. I'm done explaining myself because I've learned that not everyone is worthy of my energy. My truth is mine, and I don't owe it to anyone to explain it. The more I explain, the more I realize that I'm wasting my breath on people who will never truly understand. I've learned to value my silence. I don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting my energy. I've learned that saying nothing is sometimes the loudest message. There's strength in silence. I no longer feel the need to explain myself to those who will never listen with the intent to understand. I've stopped explaining my choices because I no longer feel the need to defend my life. I trust myself enough to know that my decisions are my own to make. I'm done explaining myself because I've come to realize that the more you try to explain yourself, the more you give others the power to judge you. I've learned that the most important person I need to explain myself to is me. I don't need anyone else's approval or validation anymore. There comes a time in life when you realize that no matter how much you try to explain yourself, people will never truly understand your journey, your struggles, or your essence. And that's when you stop wasting energy trying to convince them. I'm done trying to explain my worth to people who have already made up their minds about me. I've learned that the most important approval I need is my own. And if you don't see it, it's your loss, not mine. The more you explain yourself, the more you reveal your vulnerabilities. I've learned that silence speaks volumes, and sometimes the best answer is no answer at all. Explaining myself has never changed anyone's perception of me. I've realized that the only person I need to justify my actions to is myself, and I'm no longer wasting my breath on anyone else. I'm tired of explaining my actions, my choices, and my emotions. I don't need validation from anyone. I just need to be at peace with my own decisions. The moment I stopped explaining myself was the moment I realized how much of my energy I'd been wasting on people who didn't deserve it. I'm done chasing approval, and now I'm chasing peace. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my feelings. I've learned that the more I explain, the less I understand myself. So now I keep my truth to myself and let my actions speak louder. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. I'm done explaining myself to people who refuse to listen with an open heart. Their opinions are theirs to keep, and mine are mine to hold. I don't need to explain why I do what I do. My life, my decisions, my choices are none of your business unless I choose to share them. I've found freedom in this realization. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. I'm done explaining myself to people who can't see past their own limitations. I no longer need to fit into their narrow view of who I should be. I've come to understand that people don't always need explanations to respect you. Sometimes just living authentically is all the explanation that's needed. I've realized that explaining myself is a form of self-doubt. When I trust myself fully, there's no need to seek anyone else's approval or validation. I'm done explaining my feelings to people who never ask how I feel, or to those who only listen to respond, not to understand. My peace is worth more than their judgment. I've learned that some battles are better fought in silence. No more wasting words on those who are determined not to listen. I don't need anyone's approval to be who I am. I've spent too much time trying to explain myself to people who will never get it, and I'm done. There comes a point when silence becomes the loudest form of self-respect. I no longer feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Some people will always misunderstand you, and that's okay. I'm done trying to explain my choices to people who are only focused on their own version of reality. Explaining yourself is exhausting when the other person is not even trying to understand. I've learned to let go of that energy and pour it into things that truly matter. I'm tired of being questioned about decisions I've already made in my heart. I don't need to explain myself anymore because I know what's best for me. Life has taught me that sometimes it's better to remain silent than to explain my thoughts to people who aren't ready to listen. I don't need to explain myself to anyone who can't see my vision, my struggles, or my dreams. I'm done trying to fit into their expectations of who I should be. The more I explain myself, the more I realize that the only person I need to justify my life to is me. I've stopped seeking approval from others, and in doing so, I've found my peace. No matter how many times I explain myself, some people will still find fault with my actions. I've accepted that, and now I no longer feel the need to prove myself. There's freedom in being unapologetically yourself. I no longer explain my actions to people who won't understand because they don't define my worth. Explaining myself to those who don't care to understand is like throwing words into the wind. I've learned that some things are better left unsaid. I've stopped trying to convince people of my intentions. My actions speak louder than any words I could say, and if they don't understand, that's not my problem. I'm done explaining my boundaries to people who refuse to respect them. I don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting my peace. There's power in silence. I've stopped explaining myself to people who would rather judge than listen. I don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace over drama. I've learned to guard my energy fiercely, and that's non-negotiable. Some people will never get it, and that's okay. I've stopped wasting my time trying to explain myself to those who are too busy judging.